The Awakened King DLC for Remnant 2 brought along one of the best archetypes in the game with incredible build capabilities for ad clear and boss damage. And I believe that I have built the perfect Ritualist build that works across all difficulties. So here is my build guide for the Witch Knight. This build solely focuses on your ability to apply tons of status effects onto targets whilst still being able to pump out big amounts of weapon damage. A lot of items included in this build can be obtained through the Awakened King one-shot, but if you're unaware of how to obtain specific items or need some assistance on where you can find them, then head over to Abbey Hour or Luna Gaming if you want some great Remnant 2 guides, since I don't make guide videos myself. These creators make incredible content and both cover different bases for the game. If you're struggling to find any guides from searching their channels, then head over to remnant2.wiki.fextralife.com as they have everything that you'll need in order to locate each item in the build. Now, as I mentioned, the main focus of this build is to apply insane amounts of status effects onto targets whilst pushing out huge weapon damage. The base for this build is Ritualist as your prime archetype. That way, any status effects you apply to enemies outside of your skill will be passed on to other targets after death. You then want to make sure you have Miasma as your skill. This will allow you to instantly apply each status effect to targets caught within range. For your secondary archetype, you want to have Challenger activated with the Rampage skill. This is going to help push out large portions of damage with your weapon as your status effects continue to tick on the targets. Your armor is completely up to you. Personally, the armor I use on almost all my builds are the Field Medic Mask, the Labyrinth Mantle, the Dendroid's Leggings, and the Labyrinth Gauntlets. But as I said, this doesn't actually matter and can be changed with personal preference. Now, once again, this can also be changed depending on personal preference, but for the Relic, I use the Resonating Heart. The reason why is because the Overhealth perk that doubles your overhealth and returns it back to you over the next 20 seconds allows you to keep some continuous heals whilst fighting. Whilst the Relic is completely up to you, you're gonna want to have the Elemental Damage rune, the Skill Cooldown rune, and the Ranged Fire Rate rune. These are gonna help massively to increase your damage output. The weapons for this build, once again, are completely up to you. However, the mutators are crucial for this build. For the long gun, I like to use the new Sparkfire shotgun. The reason why is because it has an innate fire status effect that will complement this build. On top of this, you want to have the new Fetid Wounds mutator. This will make any of your critical or weak spot hits add the corrosive status effect to the target. Then add the Overflow mod on top of this, and every time you activate it, you'll be adding the burning, corroded, and overloaded status effects to targets. Then with the Ritualist Prime perk active, you'll be sending these status effects to enemies caught within range after the initial target dies. We can, however, take this a step further and add all 4 status effects onto the target. This is done with the second mutator that you'll want to add to your handgun. Now, once again, the weapon choice is completely up to you. However, the MP60R is an excellent choice. It has a 10% critical chance along with one of the fastest RPSs in the game. The mutator you'll want to use with this is Twisting Wounds. This mutator will increase the weapon's range damage by 20% to bleeding targets, but at level 10, it will apply the bleeding status effect after damaging the target with a critical or weak spot hit. What this means is that without Miasma, you're already able to attach all 4 status effects to your targets, and then when you activate Miasma, it will stack the effects. These effects applied by your weapons will also spread to other enemies with the Prime perk, whereas the effects from Miasma won't. Your melee weapon is completely up to you, but if you want to keep adding even more status effects, then using a weapon like Smolder can allow you to add another stack of burning. Pair that with the Shocker mutator and you'll be adding Overloaded once again. Personally, I like to use Overloaded on the new Ritualist Scythe. It has one of the fastest DPSs for melee weapons, and because of its mod, the mutator activates ridiculously fast. Now let's get to the meaty part, the Amulet and the Rings. For the Amulet, you'll want to have the Energized Neck Coil. This amulet will increase your status effect damage by 25%, while also causing the target to take additional explosive damage equal to 20% of the status effect's full damage. This can only be applied to an enemy once every 5 seconds, but what this means is that even if your target has the status effect already applied to them, if you hit them with the same effect after the 5-second cooldown, they'll receive the same 20% damage, which is great for taking down bosses. The first ring you'll want is the Band of the Fanatic. This will increase the damage of all your status effects by 25% by reducing their duration by 65%. Now, as much as that sounds like a big difference in the duration, just trust me, it'll mean nothing in a minute, and that extra 25% of damage will help massively. The next ring you'll want is the Shadow of Misery. This ring will increase your status effect damage by 15%, taking your current damage increase to a total of 65%. You then want to add the Burden of the Destroyer, which will decrease your firearm's ideal range, but increase all your damage by 15%. This reduction in range isn't really going to be that noticeable either, especially if you're using the Sparkfire, since it's a shotgun and mostly needs to be close range anyways. But even with that in mind, the range at which you can take out enemies because of all the other build components is staggering. The final ring to add is a pretty standard and staple ring for most builds, and that's the Stone of Balance, which will give you a 7% increase to all damage. Now with all the equipment out of the way, let's move on to the traits. There are only really a few traits that I would say are crucial for this build to work effectively, with some of them being traits that can be altered dependent on your personal preference. So what I'll do is I'll take you through the crucial traits and then through the traits that I use but are interchangeable. With Ritualist and Champion, you'll automatically have the Affliction and Strong Back traits active. Remember when I said earlier that the 65% reduction in status effect duration would matter? Well, this is where that comes in. Affliction increases your status effect duration up to plus 100%. And with the Band of the Fanatic, you lose 65% for a 25% damage increase. Affliction will add back that 65% duration and then increase by a further 35%, balancing the time back out and increasing your damage in the meantime. Adding 10 points into Flashcaster will be crucial. The reason being that you can cast Miasma fast if you're in a pinch or surrounded by a large group of enemies. It will also help massively on the higher difficulties to cast quickly and then dodge out the way. Putting 10 points into Expertise will reduce your skill cooldown by 20%, meaning you can cast Miasma every 31.5 seconds, keeping that consistent status effect damage. Adding 10 points into Siphoner will give you some crazy lifesteal when hitting targets both with your status effects and with your main attack when using Rampage. Then put a further 10 points into Amplitude. This will drastically increase the range of Miasma, making it easier to hit bosses whilst keeping your distance. It also helps to hit more enemies with your skill. Amplitude also affects the range of the Prime perk, so you'll be sending out those status effects further, hitting a greater number of enemies and clearing adds super fast. The rest of the trait points are completely up to you. However, I like to put 10 points into Triage, increasing the strength of my Relic's healing, 10 points into Barkskin for damage reduction, a further 10 into Regrowth for the passive health regen, and then 8 points into Endurance and 9 points into Vigor, increasing my health and stamina. And that's it. That's everything for the build. Now with everything in this build, you'll be clearing adds like there's no tomorrow, and with minimal effort, even on the higher difficulties. You'll also be pumping out insane amounts of damage to bosses. Another incredible feature of this build is that when you activate Rampage and you begin to deal damage to go berserk, it takes very little shots to activate. Sometimes if you already have status effects attached to several enemies, you might activate Rampage and instantly go berserk. I've had so much fun playing around with this build and I hope you do too. It's a great build to use both solo or with friends, and it's sure to be a jaw dropper if your friends know nothing about it. Your ad clear and damage output will leave them stunned. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. If you did enjoy, then please do leave a like and subscribe for even more gaming content, including some more build videos on Remnant 2, as I have more that I'd love to share, including an insane Archon build, a powerful Engineer build, and a fun melee build, so stay tuned for them. If you got all the way through and didn't enjoy the video, then thank you anyways for giving it a watch, and I hope you'll like some of my other content. I've been Deli, thank you so much for watching. Stay classy guys, peace.